This outright villain is just ridiculously overpowered. This homicidal madman sees the peoples of Tamriel only as either useful to his purposes, or more useful as reagents for his army of bones. A devout worshipper of the god of worms, he will one day bring death to all of Tamriel. Tested on legendary difficulty, with Revenge of the Enemies and Organized Bandits in Skyrim, so your experience may differ. Modlist after the character story. The Bonelord of Worms begins the game with Necromancer robes of destruction, a shiv to stab people with, and a backpack to hold all the body parts of his numerous victims. In terms of spells, he'll begin the game with Blight Curse, Necrosis, Void Bolt, Death Guard, and Deathly Fall. Both Blight Curse and Necrosis are damage over time spells that you apply to enemies. They are not projectile based, meaning that whatever you're looking at, that target will instantly become afflicted with your curse and disease. Necrosis will also deal bonus damage when the target is already afflicted by Blight Curse, meaning when you have enough magic to do it, your best attack is Blight Curse first, followed by Necrosis, followed by whatever other attacks you have. Though you will obviously gain the Reanimate Dead ability over time, it is not a focus for this character. In the beginning, you will be fairly weak and you will need your Death Guard to protect you. Your Death Guard is a very large skeleton that usually equips a sword. It will act as a tank for you and can be summoned any number of times. Once you gain the Ancient Rite perk in Conjuration, you'll be able to summon a second one as well. And when you learn how to use the Dark Pact ability, this number will increase to 6. Now, Void Bolt does damage equal to 15% of your max health and will heal you for half the damage it does. It can be specialized into some rather amazing things, such as the ability to kill any undead who are less than 50% health. But specializing is something we'll get into in the progression section. Now, if you notice the cloak around my character, that is Deathly Fall. Deathly Fall is a very straightforward ability, and when cast will put your character into a state where their Blight Curse and Necrosis are 25% more effective. It has many, many secondary effects that can be specialized into. Now, as for this character's primary ability, he breaks down corpses into their base components, takes their flesh, heart, skull, ribcage, legs, arms, and feet. This corpse harvesting ability is vital in helping him to construct his undead army. If gathering the harvested remains of your enemies becomes a borderline obsession, then you are in fact playing the character correctly. The body parts you harvest from your victims will be used to create skeletons. Unlike your Death Guards, these skeletons are permanent and will persist until killed. In the beginning, you will only be able to conjure Skeletal Warriors. Skeletal Warriors are basic tanks. They do not have that much health compared to Death Guards, so for the most part you'll want Death Guards to take the hits for you, but they will deal melee damage. And when you get them in a swarm, nothing can really hurt you. Skeletal Archers are for the most part hit and miss, pardon the pun. However, they will back up constantly when an enemy engages them, meaning their chance of dying is much less. If you value them as pack mules rather than damage dealers, then this would be the superior choice to use. However, they tend to miss their shots a lot, so I would only have 1 or 2 archers in an army of, say, 10 skeletons. Finally, the skeletal mages are melee ranged hybrids. They have an axe or sword to attack with, but will also use frost magic, or fireballs, or things of that nature, when possible. They are high damage dealers, but they are also for the most part glass cannons. The problem is that they will run directly into enemies, and as a result, the chances of them dying are fairly high if you don't have Death Guards or Skeletal Warriors picking up the slack. Now, unlike your Death Guards, there is no summoning limit to the number of skeletons you can have. Only the limit to your PC, how many skeletons you can have on screen before your game crashes. I was able to have roughly 15 skeletons before traveling to a major city caused issues. At 90 Conjuration skill, you gain the ability to summon Skeletal Overlords. The Overlord may be either a warrior, archer, or mage. My recommendation is always warrior. What happens when an Overlord is summoned is that all your skeletons are consumed and are basically merged into a single skeleton. This overlord has 100 health, stamina, and magicka for every skeleton consumed in this way. So in addition to one super powerful overlord, a bunch of generic skeletons created by the enemies that you've killed, and your conjured death guards, you're basically set to kill Tamriel. Despite starting the game with a small layer of his own, he will eventually claim Ravenscorn Spire as his own. The advantages over his small starting layer are colossal, and he will not only use it for storage, but also for the many benefits it brings him. And the biggest perk comes from the basement. In the basement, you'll be able to make a dark pact at the ritual bowl, which by cutting yourself will cure all diseases, and for 8 hours, instead of being able to summon just one minion, it will increase your summoning limit to 5. And because of the Ancient Rites perk, it's increased to 6. So with 6 Death Guards at your disposal, the skeleton army is fairly unimportant, unless you really need to overwhelm a target. Just like in Oblivion, he'll be able to turn Greater and Grand Soul Gems into Black Soul Gems at an altar during the Necromancer's moon that occurs every 2 weeks. As he will be enchanting amulets, rings, boots, and circlets, he makes the maximum use out of his victims' lives. He takes their soul and uses it to enchant, and he takes their body and uses it to create skeletons. Now, he will need to reach 100 enchanting skill in order to move forward with his character, because necromantic altars can only be used with 100 enchanting skill. Necromantic altars only serve one purpose, and that's to get you the reagents you need to ascend. If he makes all the correct decisions along a quest line known as Undeath, he will actually be able to put his soul inside a phylactery, after which he will be immune to death. Neither a werewolf or a vampire lord, this character will become a lich. You will get a gravity-defying death grip and a few other potent abilities, including a special frost armor spell that negates 80% damage. If any NPCs other than your death guards and your current follower see you in your lich form, they will attack you on sight. However, should you die in your lich form, you will simply disperse and then reform several days later at your phylactery. Your human form is merely a disguise, and whether you're disguised or in your true form, you will have 100% resistance to poison and disease, water breathing, and frost resistance. Switching between your disguise and true form has a 30-second cooldown, and there is no limitations per day. The Bonelord of Worms is a cut-and-dry psychopath. What this means is that he has a very strong compulsion to kill, just as soon as look at someone. Although it takes quite a bit of willpower, he is able to restrain himself in some cases, such as Lucan Valerius, Bellathor, the town blacksmith, so on, people who can actually benefit him. But everyone else should, in his opinion, be broken down into their base materials, that is, their souls for enchanting, and their body parts for his skeleton army. The Bonelord is very ambitious. He knows that all he needs is raw materials and time, and then he can make his ambition to rule Skyrim a reality. However, despite his ambitions, he is not stupid. He realizes that if he is noticed by the powers that be in Skyrim too early, then he is basically dead. So instead, he will take up the role of an adventurer and take on any bounty letters to kill bandits. Little do they know that, although the bandit leader is in fact dead, he is also the components for an ever-growing skeleton army. This will not stop him from murdering anyone and everyone who is wandering unprotected on the roads of Skyrim, because they have the exact same types of bones and flesh as a bandit. Everyone is fair game. In the beginning, the Bonelord will pay off any bounties he incurs in order to have a good standing with the towns. However, after his army has grown in sufficient strength, he will stop paying the bounty and actually prey on town guards. He has absolutely no respect for the divines whatsoever, and his only worship is to that of the god of worms, the patron of all necromancers, whose light from the necromancer's moon shines down once every 2 weeks to bestow upon necromancers soul gems. Now he sees Daedra as very powerful beings and will take advantage of their power all he can. So he will get Mehrunes' razor at the first opportunity and use it as his primary dagger. He will also claim the Skull of Corruption for his own, and he will use that staff whenever possible to steal dreams prior to killing people in their sleep. He will of course curse Azura's star to become the Black Star, but under no circumstances will he get the Dawnbreaker. All other Daedric artifacts are left up to your judgment. As soon as he gets himself oriented in the land of Skyrim, he's immediately going to want to seek out the Vigilant of Stendarr caravan that is traveling between Falkreath and Markarth. And when he finds it, that will begin the Undeath questline and his path toward Lichdom. However, he should only pursue that until he clears out Ravenscorn Spire and claims that as his own home. He will be able to go see the Broker in order to have Ravenscorn Spire upgraded, and he will do that as soon as possible in order to make that his permanent residence. Ravenscorn Spire will act as his base of operations from that point onward. Before you go to Helgen and start on the main quest, it's highly recommended that you complete Dawnguard entirely. What this means is that you should take the vampire path because the path of undeath makes perfect sense for this character. However, when this character eventually ascends to Lichdom, their vampire blood will be purged, meaning that any progress you've made in your Dawnguard quest is basically curtailed. So you should complete it, that way it's out of the way and you are the Lord of Castle Volgohar on top of everything else. After you begin the main quest, if you decide to participate in the Civil War, the Bonelord of Worms would never side with the Empire. He does not believe in Talos, but he knows that the Empire is against necromancy, and a single province is much easier for him to control and establish a power base in than the Empire, which is a province away. The Bonelord should be using his permanent skeletons as item mules, and you should be trading them absolutely everything that you pick up that you can't use. The idea is that you'll be able to carry absolutely everything you come across. You'll wipe dungeons entirely clean of their loot. You'll go back to town, you'll sell, you move on to the next town, you sell, you keep selling, because when you progress far enough in Undeath and you begin speaking with the broker will help you to overhaul Ravenscorn Spire and make it a place suitable for your Ascendance ritual. This will cost you a lot of money. Only after achieving Lichdom and slaying Alduin will the Bonelord of Worms finally set his eyes upon the throne of Skyrim. He will kill both Jarl Elisif and Ulfric Stormcloak in order to become the High King. Before the High Elves of the Somerset Isles were known as Altmer, they were known as Aldmer, and they lived upon the land of Aldmeris. They were the descendants of the ancient eternal spirits that were trapped here when the world was created. They were known as the Old Elnathay, the almost non-existent handful of Old Elnathay who were able to retain what they were as time marched forward became known as original spirits, Aldmeri gods. Some of these mythic-era gods would be known as Ariel, Trinimac, Mara, Lorkhan, and more. They were the Aldmeri pantheon, and in this early age, although they were seen as gods, superior beings, they were also seen as kin, because they were all ancient eternal spirits that were trapped there together. And because at the time, the living High Elves were all fated Elnathay, they had a personal connection to the gods. They knew the gods back when they were themselves gods. And it was because of this personal connection that the living gods, the divines, actually intervened in mortal affairs on a daily basis. They shaped and fostered the culture of the living mortals. The descendants of the Old Elnathay, however, did not have that deeply personal connection, but rather a spiritual connection, and they simply worshipped them as gods, but not as friends or acquaintances. The Old Elnathay did not suffer the effects of time as mortals do. However, they could still die from illness or injury, and so by illness and injury, over thousands of years, the Old Elnathay left this world. And so when no trace of the Old Elnathay remained, and all there was Aldmer, Ariel stood before the peoples, and he ascended in full view of them so that they could see that there was a path to ascension, with the hopes that they would pursue him. That was the defining moment. That was when their culture was set on its course to perfection. And so, High Elves dedicate their entire lives to seeking perfection in whatever they do, because perfection is the path to ascension. Successive generations of High Elves began to forget about their deeply personal connection with the ancient eternal spirits and their identity as brethren of those spirits. And so the divines began to be seen as gods to be worshipped and not fellow ancestors to aspire to become. This cultural shift came at about the same time they started implementing a class system on the Somerset Isles. The combination of changes to their culture were seen as a perversion, a twisting of what the divines intended. And so, several ancient elders left the Somerset Isles forever to go to the Isle of Artaeum. They would be known as the Psijic Order. Gaining an insight into the fabric of the universe that few could scarcely understand, the Psijics stand apart from the rest of Tamriel and are actually able to hide the Isle of Artaeum whenever they need to. Very few are ever accepted into the Psijic Order from the outside, and only one uninvited guest has ever appeared on the Isle of Artaeum, and that is Sotha Sil, the Dark Elf living god king of artificers and wizards. Their process of selection is so thorough. Due to their understanding of the universe, they're able to create brand new magics that people can scarcely understand. These magics, if abused, can cause terrible harm. One of their members who left the Isle of Artaeum would change Tamriel forever. His name was Vanis Galerion. He founded the Mages Guild of Tamriel that would endure for an entire era. But during his time as a student, he was nearly unmatched. He only had one rival. That man's name was Manny Marco. Manny Marco delved into previously unexplored mysticism, and in doing so, he learned how to rip the soul out of one creature and place it in the body of another creature that had died, how to use magics to animate a creature without a soul at all, how to weave fire, breath, and spirit together to create brand new creatures. But his true agenda was to defy death itself, something that even the old Elnafey could not do. Vanis Galerion told Manny Marco to stop his experiments immediately, explained his wrongdoings, and Manny Marco appeared to listen to reason. However, when the Psijic Order eventually sent Manny Marco out on a mission to Tamriel, this is what Manny Marco was waiting for. With no intention of ever returning to the Psijic Order, Manny Marco had been unleashed. Manny Marco wandered Tamriel for some time, gathering followers who had been rejected by the Elysian Empire. Criminals, outcasts. He taught them all magic. He not only taught them basic magics, but he explained to them the mysticism of death and life weaving. They became the first necromancers. They were the Black Worm cult. Manny Marco approached Varen, the sitting emperor of Cyrodiil. Unlike the previous emperors who were dragon blood, Varen won the empire by right of conquest, meaning he always feared that he'd be seen as a pretender, an illegitimate usurper of the throne. So in order to make his claim to the throne legitimate, he listened to Manny Marco's advice that he could use the Amulet of Kings in a ritual to make himself Dragonborn, as Elysia was made Dragonborn.
I have a destiny to fulfill. By the lighting of the dragon fires, I claim my rightful lineage. By the fires of creation, let me be reborn. By the will of Akatosh, I proclaim myself Dragonborn.
However, the reality is that Elysia was made Dragonborn by Akatosh first. Then she was given the Amulet of Kings to perform the ritual, not the other way around. And a non-Dragonborn performing the ritual split the veil, protecting Nirn from oblivion.
Varen Aquilarius, you are no heir to Elysia. You will pay for your sacrilege. The veil between Tamriel and oblivion tears and splits asunder.
What's happening? Manny Marco, what have you done?
Gullible fools! The veil between oblivion and this world has been torn. My master, Moloch Baal, is free to claim Tamriel for his own.
Akatosh, forgive me! Have mercy on our souls!
But Manimarco made a fatal mistake. He sent Emperor Varen's soul to Cold Harbor, the domain of Molag Bal, where the remains of Emperor Varen met the Vistage, the hero that you play in Elder Scrolls Online. Manimarco was thinking too big, and he underestimated the Vistage. Manimarco's plan was to summon Molag Bal into the world, and then use the Amulet of Kings to absorb Molag Bal and become a Daedric prince himself, become the new Lord of Domination. In his arrogance, he was defeated by the Vistage, although in spirit form, he told the Vistage that he would simply return to life as many times as it took, and that death could not stop him. That is when Molag Bal appeared, tearing Manimarco's soul down to the depths of Cold Harbor. The Vistage would eventually enter Cold Harbor and kill Molag Bal there with the help of Meridia. Although being a Daedric prince, he wouldn't stay dead very long. It was just long enough for Manimarco's soul to be freed. Throughout history, Manimarco would appear again, and again, known only as the King of Worms, the leader of the Black Worm cult, the king of all necromancers. And necromancers would always endure in all the provinces as long as Manimarco lived, and yet when he was slain by heroes, he would miraculously return to life once more. Manimarco would not take center stage again until the Great Rebellion in the Iliac Bay region. When the various kingdoms start fighting for domination, the hero of Daggerfall finds the Totem of Tiber Septim, that is, the Matella that was originally used to power Great Myrmidium, the giant dwarven brass god that allowed Tiber Septim to conquer all of Tamriel. What happened next, no one was able to explain. It was known as the Dragon Break. From a storyline perspective, they basically made all of Daggerfall's endings happen simultaneously, which means that no one kingdom gained domination over the Iliac Bay. The Underking was finally able to gain the Peace of Death, and the King of Worms...
With his power, the King of Worms leaves his mortal frame and joins the ranks of the gods of Oblivion.
That's right, the King of Worms ascended to godhood. However, due to the Dragon Break, he both did and didn't ascend into godhood. In other words, there are two Kings of Worms now. One that is mortal, and one that is a god. Two entirely separate beings, but with the same origin. From that day onward, the Necromancer's moon has appeared in the sky, and the nights in which it partially eclipses Archay, it shines down a demonic purple light, and that purple light is known as the Shade of the Revenant. During a night of the Shade of the Revenant, all Necromancer altars are able to turn regular soul gems into black soul gems. This serves two purposes. First, it is a gift to his followers, and it is also a celestial mocking of Archay, the god of death, knowing that he has beaten Archay. He has beaten death itself. Now it is theorized that when the King of Worms is slain by the 7th champion of Cyrodiil, the hero of Kavach, during the Oblivion Crisis, that his soul went to the Oversoul that was him as the god of worms. In other words, the two that were once one became one once again. Although with the death of the mortal incarnation of the King of Worms, his influence was greatly reduced across all of Tamriel, the fact that he has ascended to godhood, that he shines his light down on the Shade of the Revenant, means that from now on, there will always be necromancers in the history, because the God of Worms will always bestow his knowledge and power upon a worthy necromancer. The Bonelord was born in High Rock, just north of Daggerfall, in the Kingdom of Tulun. This small and mostly overlooked kingdom in High Rock actually has strong ties to Sentinel in Hammerfell. So within this small and insignificant kingdom, there's an even smaller and more insignificant town, and that town is named Westwall. One of the smallest towns in one of the smallest kingdoms in the corner of a province far, far away. When the Empire received word that Tulun was being attacked by marauders, they were too busy with the Thalmor to render any aid whatsoever. The Bonelord was only 1 year old at the time when his parents were killed, and 1 year later he was abducted in a subsequent sacking of the town by corsairs. The infant was transported across the ocean to the kingdom of Abangora, to be sold to noble families in Damuhi. He was adopted by a noble family for 150 septims. They were a family of Imperials living out of Hammerfell, mostly on the ill-gotten deals they made with corsairs. Appearing to be the patrons of a merchanting guild by day, by night they cavorted with some of the worst scum the Empire had to offer. And because Hammerfell was officially released as a province from the Empire, they didn't have to worry about the Imperial Legion looking over their shoulder. Their noble house guards were as close to official authority as you could get. So with the local authorities under their payroll, there was nothing stopping them from taking legitimate funds and using it to arm an armada of corsair ships that then went and sacked the city of Sentinel. The massive amount of profits their family gained from the lives that were lost didn't bother them one bit. But the Bonelord was too young to remember any of this. All he had were memories of his loving parents and a happy home life. His life had a strange duality to it, where he'd spend 1/3 of his time with his loving parents, and 2/3 of his time in strict training, where he would be beaten for failing to obey the commands of his trainer. From the age of 6, he was taught combat tactics and how to use a short sword and dagger. When he was 9 years old, his training turned to pure education at the hands of a retired Imperial commander. It was around that time that he stopped seeing his friends around the estate anymore. One day his father was remarking as to how beautiful he was, and then he had his way with the boy. While the boy cried out for help from his mother, who was standing in the edge of the courtyard, his mother simply watched. She made no move to help him, and she didn't appear distressed or angry. And as the child started screaming, she smiled wickedly. The child thought himself their real son. In reality, their real son was living it up in the Imperial city. However, the Imperial Legion needed more soldiers. So they bought and raised the boy, trained him in just what he needed to know to be an effective soldier, so that their own child could respectfully decline service to the Empire and not be seen in a negative light. The child was abused time and time again. He only tried to flee once, before he realized the house guards weren't there to protect him so much as keep him there. Over the next few months, his will was broken and he came to accept it as part of everyday life. By the time he was 13, 1 year from being able to serve in the Imperial Legion, he was finally allowed to leave the manor. And so well equipped with a bodyguard at his side, he traveled all over northern Hammerfell. The bodyguard much preferred it when he traveled during the day. However, he insisted on traveling at night one night when he saw a shimmering in the desert. Before the bodyguard could stop him, he climbed over the sand dune to see a purple beam of light going into an altar. Standing before the altar, a necromancer noticed him immediately and attacked. The bodyguard moved to defend him, and with one clean slash, killed the necromancer, rending him to pieces. However, in his final moment of life, the necromancer unleashed a blast of red energy, and the bodyguard fell to the ground a withered husk. Looking at the corpse of the man who died to protect him, he thought to himself he should be feeling sad right now. But he didn't. Nor did he feel joy. He simply felt nothing. Then for some reason, it occurred to him that this man wasn't here to protect him at all. And he shouldn't feel sorry for him. This man was here to keep him from fleeing, to make sure he returned to the manor when his journey was done. He knew he would be entering Imperial service, but what he had just come to realize was that this was a calculated investment on his parents' part, so that he would have stories to tell, so that he would appear to be a man of the world. He had never thought these things before. He had no reason to doubt his parents. And that's when he made the biggest realization of all. These thoughts weren't his. They were coming from the light, from the altar. And so stepping over the remains of his bodyguard, no, his captor, he approached the altar. Upon the altar was a single brown book. He opened it, and as he stared at the symbols in this strange purple light, they took on a form he could read, standard Cyrodiilic text. What he literally found was a guidebook to the mortal body. Bone, blood, flesh, brain, heart. All the purposes, necromancy, enchanting, alchemy, all the things he never knew he wanted to know were now laid bare before him. He found even more books inside the necromancer's backpack. Everything from spell tomes to maps to history books. The necromancer's journal revealed everything to him. He lived in Skyrim, in a secluded lair in Blackreach. He only came to Hammerfell to get a manual of bone weaving, nothing more. But as the morning's light came, the text returned to its illegible state, strange symbols that he couldn't understand. A few months later, just before his birthday, he arrived home at his family manor. His parents were angry at him, but he explained that his bodyguard was killed in a bandit raid, and that he barely survived. His parents noticed how even his very mannerisms changed, as he called upon one of the house guards, like a servant, to deliver his things to his room, and sat down nonchalantly at the table. The meek boy that they had been abusing was gone. What stood before them was a somewhat cocky man. Making no move to strike up conversation with his parents, he merely opened up a book that he had been holding and began reading it. His parents looked over his shoulder as he read at the dining room table. They attempted to decipher the strange symbols in the book, but were unable to do so. His mother and father stood there silently until his mother finally nudged his father into saying something. His father asked what book he was reading. He replied that it was a spell book, and that he was researching a brand new spell that he had discovered while he was out and about. Before his father could ask about the spell, he slammed the book closed and asked when dinner was. And just like that, they brought a caterer in and had a large feast for the son's homecoming and eventual departure to join the Imperial Legion. The mother and father were too spooked by this sudden change in the son to actually converse during dinner. However, they had vendors in, and the vendors and the guests all made lively conversation, and at one point they asked him, fairly insensitively, how did he get his scar? And so he told a tale about how he was wandering, his bodyguard was killed, and how he had to fight off a bandit with only an iron dagger, and how he slew the bandit, and tracking the bandits back to their camp, he killed them and took their treasure, using it to pay his way back home. And he admitted to everybody that he was leaving out some of the more gruesome details for the sake of dinner. One of the tutors that came to the party didn't believe his story, said that you didn't expect us to believe that you actually killed all those bandits with just a shiv. To which the Bonelord replied the magic helped, casting a spell at the ceiling. Although the spell had no visible impact on the ceiling itself, it glowed for all to see, and there was a thunderous applause from across the table. One of the party guests cheered and went to the father, saying that he had the prestigious honor of having not only an Imperial soldier, but an Imperial mage in the family. And with that level of a contribution, their family status in the Imperial city would be secure. But to the other citizens of Damohi who had been invited, this was their first look at magic. Magicians traveling through were very uncommon, so the night was a spectacle. As the warm evening gave way to night and the night gave way to the biting chill of the early morning, the guests left and the family retired to bed. There wasn't even the smallest sound as he opened his parents' bedroom door. He quickly stabbed both of them dead, and then harvested them for body parts. He would do the same with the house guards and any other witnesses. Then, smashing a lantern on the ground, he allowed the house to burn, walking away from Damohi forever. Studying in the shade of the Revenant, he learned much. Things that would take other people years of study to pick up, he picked up almost immediately. And although he knew he still had to flex his magical muscles, as it were, to gain a larger pool of magic to work with, he knew that he was years beyond the average necromancer. Studying the journals of the various necromancers he killed, he discovered that there was a conflict between the remnants of the Order of the Black Worm and a new faction led by a necromancer named Antioch, who sought to usurp the King of Worms' place. The Bonelord believes that the voices he hears in his head on the nights of the Shade of the Revenant are in fact the voice of the King of Worms, the God of Worms, and that this voice is telling him that he needs to take the power from all the other necromancers who have abandoned the Order of the Black Worm in service of this Antioch. Take their power and wield it for his own, to restore the Order of the Black Worm and take its place as the King of Worms, as the God of Worms representative. If the journals are right and Antioch is after lichdom to ascend much like Manny Marco did into a state of limited immortality, then that too should be his goal, except he will take it from Antioch. This the Bonelord is certain of. The God of Worms has commanded him to take everything from everyone and create a new Order of the Black Worm on Tamriel, starting with Skyrim. The Bonelord freely accepts the fact that he was nothing before the light of the shade of the Revenant shined down upon him and told him the truth. But now, armed with the truth and the power of necromancy, he plans to conquer all of Skyrim. And so without incident, he was able to retrace his steps down to the shortcut into Blackreach, establishing for himself a suitable lair there. First, he will build a suitable army. Then, he will go after Antioch and take everything from him. This is a listing of the mods used in this build. The first set are the required mods to get the same effect, and the second set are the recommended mods. This video assumes that you have the mods and programs inside of the Common Mod Index, aka the Common Foundation. For any mods not listed here, check out my Ultimate Mod Codex for Skyrim. The spells that this character uses, Blight Curse, Necrosis, Deathly Fall, Death Guard, Void Bolt, are all handled through Forgotten Magic, and you'll actually be able to level these spells up as you use them. We'll go over that more in the path of progression later. Undeath is a unique quest mod that not only gives you the ability to transform into a lich, provided you follow the quest line the right way, but it also gives you access to Ravenscorn Spire, Black Soul Gem creation, and a few other things that are specific to this build. Now keep in mind that Undeath is an abandoned mod. The author no longer supports it. What this means is that the community has taken upon itself to make several patches for it. There are compatibility patches and whatnot, but if you have an issue, you can't go to the Undeath page on the Nexus and expect a reply because the mod is abandoned. That said, there are no viable alternatives. This is the best Undeath adventure quest mod there is. So making it work is paramount, and that's why these other two mods are included as well. And for the bottom of the three links, you're actually going to want to go to the Files page and select Greater Lich and Undeath Race Fix. I have not tested the Immersive Lichdom beta, but it looks pretty cool. That said, I know for a fact the Greater Lich and Undead Race Fix work. As a Breton, this character is going to benefit greatly from using Imperius, specifically the Man-Mer-Blood Racial, that is going to allow him to stab with his dagger in order to rapidly deplete his stamina, and while his stamina is depleted, his magicka regeneration will be much greater. Although entirely optional, this supports a poison style of gameplay, where your character is expected to poison their dagger, and whenever they run out of magicka, stab the enemy until their magicka has regenerated. This mod will give your character a backpack very similar to those used in Frostfall. The backpack's only purpose is to increase your carry weight. You see, in addition to carrying alchemy ingredients, your character's going to be holding a lot of body parts of your slain enemies, and as a result, will need that extra carry weight when a skeleton isn't available for trade. As the mod's name suggests, this mod will allow you to become the High King of Skyrim. There are several requirements for you to do so, and there are different ways to go about it, such as marriage. However, the Bonelord will inevitably kill Jarl Elisif and Ulfric Stormcloak in order to gain that. However, from a roleplay perspective, this should not be attempted until after defeating Alduin and gaining Lichdom. The harvesting of body parts, the skeleton army, all of it is handled by Percus Maximus, so this is the overhaul you'll want to use for this build. Also, alternate start living their life is going to put you in the Necromancer's lair in Blackreach. Make sure to install any and all applicable compatibility patches and fixes for Percus Maximus in the links below. Considered by many to be vanilla at this point, Apocalypse the Magic of Skyrim is the best spell mod for Skyrim. Simply put, other mods like Midas Magic don't even come close. These spells are balanced, they are well made, and with the curses and various utility spells, especially Akado's Recital for putting Deathly Fall on the automatic cast, this is flat out the go-to mod for the Bonelord to use when he's not using his primary abilities from Forgotten Magic. Be sure to go into the files section for this mod and download the Percus Maximus compatibility patch for it as well. As a Necromancer, you're going to spend a lot of time with undead minions. This shuts up zombies, and it shuts up skeletons from their creaky creak noise. This collection of mods serves but one purpose in this build, and that is to give the Bonelord more victims to kill. Interesting NPCs adds just that. NPCs that have their own backstories and histories. Some of them are marriageable, some of them can be followers, but it adds many of them. By contrast, inconsequential NPCs adds NPCs with no backstory whatsoever who won't even engage you in dialogue other than to basically ignore your presence. And they're people going about their everyday lives who don't care that you're the Dragonborn, and they don't want to tell you their life story. Finally, the Legendary Cities and Oakwood mods add in content that was removed from Skyrim that existed when you played through Skyrim in Elder Scrolls I: The Arena. Since these towns are fully populated, it means more victims for the Bonelord. Harvest Overhaul simply tweaks the amount of ingredients you get per harvested plant to make it something more reasonable in line with the actual plant and how it appears to you. An entire bush should have more than one flower. Any and all alchemy-reliant characters will need Harvest Overhaul in order to have the maximum amount of fun with the game. Although this character won't always be reliant on alchemy, those first few levels he will require lots of magicka potions. Also, if you do decide to adapt a style where you basically waste all your magicka, run in and stab people in order to make your magicka regenerate faster, then you're going to be able to benefit from the poisons you can make through alchemy as well. The Bonelord is a Breton, and should use the start a Necromancer at a secret location. At this point he should make use of pretty much everything that is in this lair. On the counter next to the Arcane Enchanter you should find a dagger for your character to use. It's recommended you immediately assign it to a number on your favorites menu, as whenever you run out of magicka, it is advisable to switch to your dagger and stab the enemy. Over on the other side of the layer you should see 3 spellbooks. Specifically, one that is a passive aura that you can have active that enhances minions, a simple ward, and a permanent raise animal ability. So for example, if you kill a wolf, you can raise it as one of your minions. From here you should hit the tilde key to open up the command console. Next you're going to want to type help, and in quotes, Fur Survivor's Black Bag, and close quote. This will show you one piece of armor. Go ahead and type player, add item, and put in the unique code that is given to you. The first 2 digits will be different depending on your installation of Skyrim. However, the following digits will always be the same, regardless of your installation. After you put in the code, put space and then 1, and it should add the bag to your inventory. This Fur Survivor's Black Bag, while worn, will give you 100 additional carry weight. Next, type help, and in quotes, Tongues of Old. This will give you a specific perk. Then type player, add perk, noting the mod code, which in my case is 36, but yours is going to be different. You're going to want to make sure you know what number this is. 12, 6, F, 5A. This is going to add the perk to the character. They will gain the Call Undead ability. At this point, you're going to want to add all the perks I've displayed on screen right now, replacing XX with the mod code that you found out when you typed Help Tongues of Old. That is the first 2 characters of that code. Next, you're going to want to open up the command console again and type help, and in quotes, Forgotten Magic, Void Bolt, close quote. And once you hit enter, you're going to see yet another code. Make note of the first 2 characters because that is your unique mod code for the codes you're going to enter. So in this case, you're going to want to enter player, period, add item, the mod code, followed by 01C562. And that's going to give you a tome of Void Bolt. You're going to be able to learn that from your inventory screen. Go ahead and repeat the process with the following codes. Once you've learned them all, you'll be ready to go. Now, returning to Blackreach is not a big deal, and it will be much easier for this character than others. Your lair will remain intact. The knapsack, chest, and larger chest will all remain protected storage. The armor rack, as well as the alchemy lab and arcane enchanter, will remain available for your use, as well as the bed. Keep in mind that at the beginning, the Death Guards do not live very long. You will be able to enhance their lifetime with perks, but for now, summon the one and use it as a distraction in order to get around the sphere. As soon as the load screen is finished, you're going to want to dive out of the way, allowing the skeleton to take the brunt of the damage. Immediately head in this direction. Picking up the Crimson Nirn root is optional. You need to press the button before any Falmer attack, which they will have already aggroed on you. Use the lever to go to Skyrim. Make sure to immediately pull this lever. Once you pull that lever from this point on, getting back into Blackreach is easy. Now, there are typically hostile encounters to both directions, so instead, climb over to the edge and overlook what may for you be a city. If you have the Legendary Cities mod installed, getting to safety is simply getting into that fortress. For that reason, it's recommended you scale down the mountain instead of taking the paths which typically have danger in them. This is the safest way to reach the town guards, who will not bat an eye at the fact that you're wearing Necromancer robes. If you want to roleplay this better, I recommend getting your hands on a pair of regular mage robes and wearing them interchangeably with your Necromancer robes. Remember that this town has a blacksmith and several other things, so in terms of getting things from your lair to sell, it isn't very much of a distance at all. Although this and your lair in Blackreach are most suitable for your needs, in the beginning, you'll definitely want to abandon this when you gain access to Ravenscorn's Spire. There are three main ways to gauge this character's progression. The first is through leveling up their Forgotten Magic. In order to gain access to the Forgotten Magic menu, simply hit Escape and go to Mod Configuration. In the Forgotten Magic menu, select Warlock. I recommend setting Blight Curse, Void Bolt, Necrosis, Death Guard, and Deathly Fall to track, where you'll always be able to know exactly how close they are to leveling up. When they do level up, you'll be able to invest very specific perks into them and customize them. Now, by default settings, you can level up a spell up to 5 times. So with 10 perks to choose from, there is definitely some variety. When you do level up a spell fully, you're going to want to go into Magic Affinity and set a Death Affinity. Basically, you'll gain affinity points, and you can decide which of your abilities you want to become stronger. And with this, since this character is only going to be using death magic, it makes perfect sense to only level up death. Your character will be very formidable once all his spells are maximized. In other words, he'll become so powerful you really won't need your skeleton army, although you will keep them for convenience sake. Next are talents. You'll notice that you'll start the game with 4 conjuration perks specific to the necromancy tree. At the soonest possibility, you need to raise harvest so that you'll get a more consistent yield from your enemies. Bone Mastery, rank 2 will give you archers, rank 3 will give you mages. But as soon as you get 50 skill, you're going to want to get Ancient Rites because it's going to allow you to summon an additional Death Guard. You're also going to want to pick up Elemental Potency as soon as possible because technically your Death Guards are summoned minions like Daedra. They aren't technically considered reanimated undead. Bone Conservation will mean that you'll receive more bones back when you release your skeletons. And the Lord of Bones at 90 Conjuration skill will allow you to basically summon up a Lord of Bones, as I explained earlier. Now, the focus perk of the Necromage allows you to use the 7 Souls ability to summon 7 corpses right on the spot. Those will basically take the place of your Death Guard. And it isn't that bad having 7 spirits right off the bat. But it really isn't necessary considering how Ravenscorn's Spire's Dark Pact will work with this character. Instead, for a focus, I recommend on heading up the restoration tree, specifically through the malediction, which are curses, and carrier, which are diseases. Get yourself Plague Lord, and then ultimately the Defiler. The Defiler will give you a curse of binding, which will, as long as the bound target is alive, you cannot die. The only problem with this ability is that your spells are 50% more expensive, so a single necrosis might wipe out all your magicka. But it doesn't matter because you can't die at the time. And your minions will still be hitting the enemy for you anyway. But considering this requires 95 restoration skill and the Master Restoration perk, it's very unlikely you'll reach this point anytime soon. Now, eventually you might get Alteration up to where you get the Architect of Magic. And when you put 2 points into Architect of Magic, you will gain a second focus ability. So you can have both the Seven Souls ability and the Curse of Binding ability at the same time. Also, the Seven Souls ability, for some reason, was causing crash issues for me, so I don't consider it part of the build since it tended to crash my game. As soon as you are able to, put a perk into Novice Destruction, which will make all your destruction skills, aka pretty much everything you picked up from Forgotten Magic, 15% cheaper and stronger. Then pick up Ambitious Methods, and every 4 skill levels you get of Destruction will increase your damage by 1%, in addition to the base 10% it gives you for just picking up the perk. Now, where Apprentice Destruction really shines is, say you cast Blight Curse and then Necrosis, and then followed up with a Void Bolt. That Void Bolt is going to be 15% stronger because of Apprentice Destruction. But other than that, Destruction perks will not benefit this character, so you're best putting your perks elsewhere. Enchanting is non-optional for this character. This character will want to constantly enchant rings and amulets, boots and gloves. And only when this character's enchanting is at 100 will they be able to use necromantic altars and prepare the ingredients for the Lich ritual. Now, you can only have 1 prodigy perk per character, and having looked at all the different prodigy perks, we figured out that the Infiltrator is in fact the best one for this character. You'll get Shadowbound after just 5 skill ups. And what Shadowbound does is, once every 5 minutes, if you enter sneak mode with your weapon drawn, or basically in spellcasting mode, you'll make you invisible for 2 minutes, which is really cool, and you'll stay invisible until either your weapon actually hits a target, meaning if you say slash and miss, it won't suddenly make you visible, or cast a spell successfully. So basically, you can make yourself unseen, and enemies will actually go after your minions first, which is really helpful considering you're going to have no armor at all. You're going to want to put 2 out of the 3 perks into Alchemy right off the bat. Then, you're going to want to get the Physician to help with your Magicka potions, but at the same time, you're also going to want to get Distillation, specifically 2 points into it. These are going to allow your Poison Dagger to hit multiple times. Other than those basic abilities though, your character isn't really going to delve into alchemy that much. But you are constantly going to want to get a new circlet, new gloves, new boots, new rings, new amulet, and enchant, and that is how your character is going to progress. When you've purged all enemies from Ravenscorn Spire and you're ready to take it as your own, you need to seek out the Broker's Shack between Markarth and Falkreath, and there you'll be able to speak to the broker. She will sell human flesh, black soul gems, things of that nature. In addition to selling basic things you need for your Lich transformation, she will also sell overhauls for both the Solitude Sewers and Ravenscorn Spire. It's important to note that while Solitude Sewers is a supported place to perform the ritual at, from a role-playing perspective, this character would never take that option. Because it is far too close to the Imperial Seat, someone could just wander through and destroy his phylactery. This character is at his best after claiming Ravenscorn Spire as his own and claiming immortality. That is when he can turn his eyes to Alduin and all the other threats in Skyrim. I've been asked several times what my favorite character build is, and honestly, it's the Knight of the Nine. And the reason it's the Knight of the Nine is because the Knight of the Nine has so much connection to my gameplay experience in Oblivion. I could talk about that until the end of time, but we'll save that for another video. We're talking about the Bonelord of Worms. If the Knight of the Nine's my favorite, the Bonelord of Worms is my second favorite. Not because of its connection to Oblivion or Daggerfall, but rather just on the merits of this being a damn fun character to play. Now let's get down into the basement. This character has a place he belongs. Ravenscorn's Spire he owns, and it is a lot more fitting than any other player home for any other character. I mean, I was able to make the Alchemy Sanctuary work for the Synod Artificer, but this Ravenscorn's Spire fits this man perfectly. Not only in theme, but in function. His shrine to the God of Worms is right here when he makes the Blood Pact. For 8 real-life hours, or an equivalent in-game time, he gains the ability to summon more than just 2 minions. So we throw on Deathly Fall, which grants him free summons. I'll show you that perk in just a moment, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There we go. Wait. 6? Yeah, it was 6. Either way. So, let's really quick go to mod configuration, and then under Forgotten Magic, we go to Warlock. Something everyone should invest in is Puppet Master. What Puppet Master is going to do is it's going to make your summons last twice as long and make them free to cast while you're in the Deathly Fall state. That's those glowing runes that was on my character. Now another really cool thing, now on the Death Guard, you'll see Possession. What that does is for every Death Guard I have summoned, the character gains 100 health. This means that I didn't really have to invest in very much health. I got like 200 health on the character, but it doesn't matter because 6 Death Guards summoned, that's plus 600 health. So, 800 health for the character, that only invested 200 into it. Everything else goes into Magicka, Magicka, Magicka. And this guy is a Magicka hog. I mean, if you're not going to use Possession and, summon all your Death Guards, and you're planning on playing a different way, then you're going to have to invest more into health than Magicka, and, you have to balance the two. It becomes very irritating. Now, if you do Undeath successfully, your phylactery will stay here the whole time, and this is kind of just like a reminder of where your soul is. And if you happen to die in Lich form, you will immediately respawn right here on the magic rune. And it's pretty cool, actually. Now, as for Lich form, let's transform into that right now. Now, there is something you need to know about Lich form. As far as the transformation into Lich form goes, everyone but your Death Guards will turn against you. That includes regular conjured skeletons. We're talking about the kind that you build. And basically, by the time you go Lich, you have to make a choice. Are you going to use your Lich powers more, or are you going to continue to have your army out? And if your army gets destroyed, that's okay, you can go Lich then. But unfortunately, this is a conflict between Percus Maximus, that has the skeletons, and Undeath. And since Undeath is no longer supported, unless someone comes out with a compatibility patch that's going to fix this, you just have to live with it. That said, by the time you gain the ability to have 6 Death Guards out at the same time, you don't really need anyone else. You're a powerhouse, just bam. And as far as Lich goes, it's a very interesting form, because you have a basic set of abilities. Your primary mouse button is a lifting ability, where you can basically grab someone. Now, I can't grab my skeletons, but like a humanoid, you could grab them, spin their corpse around, and basically shoot them into the air. And when I say their corpse, I mean they're just ragdolled body, because they can survive it. But what's really cool is if you knock them, say, headfirst into the ceiling, they're going to be stunned for a second. And while they're on the ground, you just shoot them with an Incinerate. Now, Incinerate is the go-to spell for the Lich, and it's pretty awesome. But at any point, you can hit Control, and it will give you this menu. Incinerate, Ice Storm. Frost Armor is a very good spell. It's going to use a lot of magic. I'll show you it right now. but in exchange for that, you gain 80% damage resistance while that's up. And say you exit out of Lich form, you will retain that 80% resistance. So it's really cool. What you can actually do is you can go into Lich before a fight, you can apply the Frost Armor to yourself, then you can exit Lich form and do the entire fight in your regular form if you want. And as far as your regular form goes, it is ridiculous once you've got all the abilities. So you basically strategize. Do you want power in numbers, or do you want power in yourself? And if you want power in yourself, you simply use Deathly Fall, summon 6 Death Guards, and then go Lich. And the idea is that you still have numbers, you still have these Death Guards protecting you, but under no circumstances can you have an Overlord or, you know, like 12 skeletal soldiers, unfortunately. That said, you should still collect body parts, and you should definitely use those body parts whenever possible when you're not planning to go Lich, because having an army to fight for you is really what this build is about, and it's awesome. But the Lich form itself is very enjoyable. It glides over water. It's a hell of a lot of fun. The damage output is ridiculous. My Death Guard can put up a strong front against an enemy, can withstand so many hits, but my Lich, incinerate. 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 Just like that. That's how powerful it is. Of course, some of the other abilities aren't to be sneezed at either, say Lightning Storm, for example. I mean, Lightning Storm isn't as powerful, but use it on a mage and their magicka is basically going to get depleted right away. Now, one of the really cool things you can specialize into with your Blight Curse is something called Soul Reaper. And the idea is if you kill anything that you've afflicted with Blight Curse, you'll gain a charge of Soul Reaper. And you can have up to 3 Soul Reaper charges on your character simultaneously. Each charge lasts for 10 minutes. What a Soul Reaper charge does is it increases your spell damage by 10%. So when you have 3 charges, it's 30% increase in your damage. So when you have 3 Soul Reaper charges, that basically lets you have this momentum in combat. Just a non-stop wave of kills. Now, speaking of kills, I'm actually going to take this character out and just kill a bunch of stuff, just to show you. Now, you'll notice that I'm already a Lich, and I'm going to go to Kynesgrove to kill that dragon. Of course, I'm going to bring my Death Guards with me. I won't dare transform in Kynesgrove, because then I'd have to kill their entire population, and Delphine would become my enemy or something. I don't know. Bullshit. So the way I like to do my favorites list is 1 for my melee weapon, 2 for Blight Curse, 3 for Necrosis, 4 for Void Bolt, 5 for Death Guard. The way this works is, under any circumstances, if I run out of magicka, immediately switch to Mehrunes Razor, power attack with it, and that will immediately boost up my magicka regeneration, because I'll run out of stamina real quick. I have invested no points into stamina. Now, as far as Blight Curse and Necrosis go, Blight Curse is applied first. It's cheaper. It's a damage over time effect. And depending on how you specialize it, and how you specialize Necrosis, Necrosis will interact with an existing Blight Curse on the target by healing you and dealing instant damage to them. So it's really good to cast Necrosis on a target that already has Blight Curse, provided you specialized it that way. You'll definitely, for this build, want to look at all the specialization options in detail. Now, Void Bolt is very expensive to cast. It's something that, if you've got both of your diseases on, then you want to go ahead and just throw Void Bolts to spend the rest of your magicka, so that you will have an opportunity to then power attack with your dagger, so that you can reapply your diseases, and then repeat the cycle. It's a damage rotation just like anything else. It's a really cool and really overpowered damage rotation. Most things, when you're reaching max level, will die just from your Blight Curse and Necrosis combo. That's just how ridiculous it is. Now, one of the big reasons I recommended Apocalypse is for Akado's Recital. Now, Akado's Recital has changed in the newer version. And basically, you have Akado's Recital active on one hand, and then you have your other spell active on the other, you cast Staccatos Recital, and it's going to copy the spell that you had in your other hand. So the idea is that I believe Oak Flesh and Deathly Fall are on that right now. Alright, so I just encountered a bear. My first reaction is always back up, summon Death Guards. You'll notice that I'm not taking a lot of damage, and the Death Guards will always tank for me. This red aura that's on the Death Guard is actually the Death Guard draining my stamina in order to heal itself. And that's the awesome part, is that Death Guards, if you specialize them to do so, will be able to do that. Now when my stamina's low, my magicka regenerates faster. So basically, it's a win-win for me, because the Death Guards are healing themselves and my magicka regeneration is getting boosted from having a lack of stamina. Of course, this makes me practically unable to run away from a fight because my run speed slows down when I run out of stamina. That's a-okay. Another thing to be wary of is, while the Ancient Tongues will give you the ability to trade with a Death Guard, do not do so. Because Death Guards are not like your regular constructed skeletons. When they go away, they take their inventory with them. So you don't want to give anything to a Death Guard, only a regular constructed skeleton. Now I know it looks like I'm in Fairy Happy Land here, but that's because I'm using the Summer Skyrim overhaul, which is kind of hilarious. Now in the distance you see that giant there. I'm going to demonstrate what Blight Curse and Necrosis will do. So basically, Blight Curse first, then Necrosis. And you'll notice that the giant's health is rapidly depleting. He's going to die long before he reaches me. And you see, I gained a charge of Soul Reaper just now because he died while Blight Curse was affecting him. So it seems like we got ourselves a bear. That gigantic explosion just now was a function of a specialization I have in Deathly Fall, where I have a chance to shoot a Void Bolt automatically. Now my Void Bolts also have a chance to explode. So what happened was an automatic Void Bolt was shot and then it exploded. So that was a combination of random perks just going off. When I said perks, I meant procs. This hag is a perfect example of an easy kill. You can see my skeletons dealt with the hag no problem. Now as for this hag, what you do is you enter crouch mode, then you click on her, harvest her body. 2 feet, hand, leg, and human flesh. Keep in mind that if you have Harvest Overhaul, you are definitely not going to want the humanoid loot on, because the bones you get are not compatible with the bones you get from harvesting. So you end up with a lot of duplicates, they look weird, it just doesn't work well. Stick with the harvesting. The harvesting makes sense. Now to show you a good scale of how ridiculously powerful this character is, I'm just going to go ahead and use Blight Curse and Necrosis. Let's do that right now. I used Blight Curse and Necrosis on one, Blight Curse and Necrosis on another. Immediately summon my skeleton minions to protect me. Use the rest of my magicka on Void Bolts. You're going to notice that that mammoth kind of died very quickly. This is typical. Now when you run out of magicka like that, you just take out Mehrunes Razor and hack away. When you run out of stamina, all of a sudden your magicka regenerates a lot faster. Now that the magicka is regenerated enough, Blight Curse, Necrosis, and a Void Bolt. And you notice that the giant just kind of falls down dead. This is the typical Bonelord encounter, if you choose not to use your Lich powers, of course. But say you have your skeleton army out, say 15 or 20 skeletons with you. That's the type of battle you can expect, mostly sitting back and letting your skeletons do the work, occasionally throwing in pot shots like that. Now when you have Death Guards out, it's absolutely fine to just let the Death Guards take damage. However, when you have permanent skeletons, what you want to do is you want to get either Heal Undead or some other ability like that, where you basically just heal your permanent skeletons as to not let them die. And you become kind of a weird, you know, evil healer, I guess. You don't use normal restoration, just the dark side of it, so to speak. I mean, that's why I ultimately did pick the Defiler as my restoration. You can see that there are two wings to restoration, okay? There is the Idol, which is over here, and the Idol is all about healing. And then the reverse side of restoration, this wing, is all about death, the Defiler. And when it just comes down to it, you use Tortured Soul, Carrier, Malediction, Plague Lord. That's what it's all about. This is a story mission, specifically in Kynesgrove, toward the beginning of the main quest. There's something you're going to learn, is that dragons are fairly insignificant for this character. Now we're going to prove this as Alduin resurrects the dragon at Kynesgrove, and I'm going to beat it into the ground very quickly, while my Death Guards take all the damage for me. You'll notice that all dragons are immune to Blight Curse, but we can still use Necrosis. Now rather than get blasted, we summon our Skeleton Army. The Skeleton Army will take hits for me. Keep Necrosis up on dragons and then hit them with Void Bolts. Void Bolts will do a great amount of damage. And the dragon will die very quickly. Now, you may be wondering, I just killed a dragon that quickly. It's gotta be on novice difficulty, right? Well, actually, it's legendary difficulty. That is how powerful this build is when it reaches maturity. And you just have to accept that this character becomes godlike. It starts off fairly weak, but it ramps up very quickly until you're a dragon-slaying, people-flaying machine. Alright, everyone knows the towers. We've seen the towers to death. So let's go ahead and summon ourselves up 6 Death Guards. And now I will show you how the Lich works in terms of fighting. You notice that the transformation takes more time when you're around more enemies, and the main reason for that is simply script delay. You notice that the first thing you should always do with the Lich is spend all of your magicka to cast Frost Armor in order to gain an 80% damage resistance. Then immediately switch back to something else. Now, when multiple enemies try to interfere, what you do is you use your left mouse button to grab them and propel them into orbit. Now, you'll notice that while they're on the ground, they're pretty vulnerable, so we can just go ahead and, get a free shot in or two. But if they turn their face toward you again, you just send them flying again. It's that simple. But when someone up there decides to start shooting you, just do the scorpion thing and say, "Get over here." And then feed them to your minions. You'll notice that your minions will turn around and start kicking their ass. No big deal, right? Incinerate. I have no idea why... Oh, it's a bandit-trained saber cat. Well, either way, I can pull it out, throw it over there. My skeletons will adjust, and we'll all blast it to death. The point is that this is how Lich gameplay works. You're basically a god of crowd control using your grip against most enemies. Keep in mind that some things, such as dragons, cannot be gripped. But when you're up in areas like these towers, for example, well, anyone who decides to oppose you is probably going to fly off. And look at that guy down there, that crusher. Let's bring him up here, okay? And we can basically snipe the crusher from up here. Alright, so the bandit chief decides to aggro on me. no problem, we'll just throw him off this whole thing. Okay? No big deal for me. And if he wants to get back up, he'll have to wake up first, which probably isn't going to happen. Now I'm just going to hop down there to go fight the bandit chief really quick and show you how ridiculous this is. First of all, we're going to pull him up, throw him over here. Then we'll really quick get a couple pot shots in. Remember, in water they stay stunned for a while. But you can just pick him up again, toss him around. Single target humanoids are just no match for the Lich. Period. Unless they can kill you in 1 or 2 hits, which as long as your frost armor is up, you don't have to worry about. You basically just take your time and annihilate them. This bandit chief actually has an exceptional amount of health. Other targets are killed in 1 incinerate. As you can see, destruction skill does level up. You fly over water most of the time. Not a big deal. Now, unfortunately, the Lich is unable to deconstruct corpses, so if you want to deconstruct a corpse, you've got to revert to your human form. Now, what's really cool about the RP of this, the roleplay, is that the Lich form is your true form, and this is just a human disguise. But unfortunately, you lose access to certain abilities in your true form, so it doesn't make very much sense. Either way, we'll harvest his body parts. Yep, got lots of good stuff. I'll take the elven... No. Gold, human flesh, it's all good. Anything that you don't pick up goes to the great bite bucket in the sky. Now you notice that weird green glow that turns on you while you're swimming. That basically negates the need for breath, because as a Lich, you don't breathe anymore. That's just the reality of it. So, all kinds of interesting things. Alright, now I'm basically overburdened because I'm carrying too many body parts, but that's okay. We're going to go to our Conjure Skeleton spell. Now remember, Lich transformation is a no-go while you have conjured skeletons. There's a difference between the summoned death guards, which are summons, and the conjured skeletons, which are actually permanent things that you create. So we're going to go ahead and summon those right now. Warrior. I'm just going to summon a bunch of warriors at this point. I have no reason to summon mages or archers at this time. You'll notice, though, it does take up quite a bit of magicka, and unfortunately, the Deathly Fall perk that makes summoning free doesn't count for these guys, since you're actually constructing them. But the cool thing about these guys is that when you click on them, you can choose to deconstruct them, which gives you some of your materials back, more if you have the appropriate perks, or you rearrange their inventory. And unlike the Death Guards, when you rearrange their inventory, specifically giving them stuff, the stuff will actually stay, and even if they die, you can loot it off their corpse. Now, unfortunately, if you take away their sword and give it back to them, they probably won't use it again. Likewise, you just don't want to mess with their base equipment. And they will not use anything that you give them. They are just mainly storage mules. But either way, what we're going to do in this case is I'm basically going to create a couple more. Now, for every skeleton that I combine into a single overlord, the overlord gets 100 health, stamina, and magicka, as I said earlier. I mean, I'm just going over what I was talking about before. So let's go ahead and make an overlord right now. A warrior overlord. Now, it does take a heart and flesh, but this overlord has 100 hit points per corpse I just got. Now, remember, all these corpses can be deconstructed, and then you can arrange their inventory and basically take even more stuff. So you can basically get a lot of the body parts back. And it's definitely a good thing, because then you can use those to construct more skeletons later. Now, the Necromancer's amulet has undergone changes for Percus Maximus. It'll give all of your skeletons, including your overlords, 100 more health, which is pretty awesome. So, when you have the opportunity to get the Necromancer's amulet, use it, because this is just straight up for the Bonelord, going to help everybody. Now, once an overlord is summoned, you cannot summon another overlord, because summoning another overlord will consume this overlord, making the whole thing pointless. However, you can summon more individual skeletons to go along with the overlord. So, what's really cool about this is, say I summon 4 or 5 more skeletons, and then I bring out my death guards. Well, I got myself a pretty huge army there. So with death guards summoned, an overlord, and all my other stuff, I don't really have to be afraid of anything. Now, it is kind of funny how none of these town guards even bat an eye, as I've got a whole army of skeletons at their gates, you know? I can run straight through town, not an issue. So, not going Lich form, instead relying on a huge skeleton army, I'm going to go up to Ancient's Ascent and show you how this is going to work. There's the dragon right there. Now, once again, you'll notice that he's immune to Blight Curse, but he can be hit with Necrosis. Also, Void Bolts are insanely effective if they hit him. Alright, so you can see my skeleton army in action pelting this dragon, including the dragon bone wielding overlord, which is freaking awesome, by the way. But between Necrosis and just a series of Void Bolts, there really is no question about my supremacy over the dragons. I could just turn my back and let the dragon fall to my army. Just like that. And I get its soul. And that's pretty much how it works. Only when it's in the air do you need to be hitting it with Necrosis. I mean, its immunity to Blight Curse is kind of annoying, but it isn't immune to all other types of diseases and curses, so you just have to pick and choose which spells you're going to use, with the awareness that dragons are immune to some of them. Like Slay Living, for example, probably won't outright kill a dragon, whereas a regular humanoid, below a certain health threshold, they go pop. Alright, so we're going to head into the Bloodlet Throne really quick, kill ourselves some vampires, and I can show you what Void Bolt can be specialized into. It's rather interesting how Void Bolt actually works against, well, the undead. Watch this vampire as a test case, okay? As soon as he gets below 50% health, hit him with a Void Bolt, instant death. That is one of the things you can specialize Void Bolt into, is the ability to instantly kill undead targets that are less than 50% health. It is freaking awesome. But in general, a gargoyle is no more difficult than just backing up and letting your skeleton army have a go at them, while your Blight Curse and Necrosis eat away at their soul. But at some point, y'all were probably wondering what's going on with being the High King. Well, first of all, we head over to Markarth. Now, I don't believe I've been to Markarth before, so we're going to have to deal with that little Forsworn guy at the entrance. I believe he'll die very quickly. But we'll see. We'll see. It hasn't loaded yet. So we got Mr. Forsworn here. And then we allow the skeleton army to take care of him. And we talk to this glowing man right here. He has no voice dialogue, but basically you just go through it and take him up on his offer. This starts the quest to become the High King of Skyrim. Right here it says you need 20 supporters and 50,000 gold. Or you can get 40 supporters and you don't have to mess with either of these two people. That said, this character's roleplay says he will kill both of them, get 20 supporters, 50,000 gold, and take the throne for himself. It starts here, and that's it. You should not approach this guy or even start the quest until after you've achieved Lichdom and killed Alduin. Those are the priorities for this character. After basically you're all done, and all you've got left are DLC content to do, that's when he becomes High King of Skyrim and basically conquers the world. But because you will need 20 people of friendly status, you may want to lay off purging the cities too much until you get that requirement done. All you have to do in order to get people's support is basically you get a friendly status with them. Then you talk to them. They need to be a named NPC. And you ask them, will you support my campaign to be High King? Very simple. In this guy's case, no reason, right? But when someone is considered your friend, for example, if you give a mammoth tusk to that one lady in Whiterun, then she will support your campaign, and so on. But his campaign to become High King of Skyrim is really the only time he will give a shit what other people think. Otherwise, it's breaking people down, murdering them, so on, so forth, so on. And for all the towns that don't matter, what I mean is those towns that are added by the Frontier Fortress mod, such as Granite Hall, Blackmoor Fortress, North Keep, the Creek, Emerald City, the Wood, so on, all these different places, Sunguard City. There's really no one to befriend in these cities. Therefore, you should get most of your components from either bandits, evil necromancers who don't agree with you, or from the cities that don't matter. Now keep in mind that through your campaigns, you can basically befriend people early on, then ignore them, leave forever, and when you start the campaign to become the High King of Skyrim, you can go ahead and go back to those places and ask them, will you support me? And they'll say yes. But that's the fun of this, is that it's a progression build. You will rapidly increase in power to the point where you're just freaking ridiculous. And then you become a lich in order to gain immortality. You kill Alduin, securing your place as the hero of the land. Basically, you become a powerful dragonborn, in addition to being the Bonelord of Worms, and that's when you set your eyes on conquering everything. And, I mean, if you decide to do the Civil War on your path to conquering everything, that's absolutely fine, because a Civil War is going to give you a nearly endless supply of corpses to play with. Now, one thing this mod does is it gives you a dialogue option called, Are You Essential? And they will answer you. They will actually see he is not essential, right? Well, you can say that they will be essential from now on, or, be on your way. And that way you can kill people who shouldn't normally be able to be killed, and vice versa. This works very well into the Bonelord gameplay, because if you know it's going to break a quest, but you don't care, you want them dead, then you simply talk to them and say you're not essential anymore. After a while, these vampire attacks are almost kind of comical, because really, what can they do? Yes, they're immune to Blight Curse, but I can still use Necrosis and good old Void Bolts on them. Now, I either like how all of Sunguard City comes out, but check this out, okay? So we talk to this guy. We ask him, are you set to Essential? He is Essential. You don't need to be Essential anymore. Alright, so he can go to Sovngarde. Talk to her. Once again, are you Essential? Yes, she's Essential. You don't need to be Essential anymore. Why do we do this? Because we plan to purge this city. All in all, Sunguard City is one of my favorite cities. However, I think that it needs to be purged. So, to assist in the purging, I'm going to summon all my death guards in various locations, such as right here. And now, we'll go ahead and infect these people. So, she'll be first. Necrosis, Blight Curse, and then we back off. And we'll let our skeletons do the job. Watch her die, and she can actually die because she is no longer set to Essential. People like this bastard. Crouch, use the body, harvest him for body parts right off the bat. It's a very easy way to work when you have a skeleton army on your side anyway. But this guy over here on the docks, is he dead? I can't tell. Apparently he's not. But he will be in just a second. Alright, so for this guy right here, he's essential. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and place calm on him. And while he's calmed, we're going to ask him if he's essential. Okay? Then we're going to say, I don't need you to be essential anymore. And then we're going to murder him. Now, it's pretty easy. We're just going to cast Blight Curse and then stab him a bunch with Mehrunes Razor. Throw on a Necrosis and dual Void Bolt him. Either way, this guy won't have much of a soul left when I'm done with him. And pretty much all the enemies can be done in the same fashion. When we find one that isn't essential... So let's go ahead and target this one right here. Alright, so once again, we've encountered an essential NPC. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit her with Calm. We're going to ask her if she's set to essential. Then we're going to say she doesn't need to be anymore. And then we hit her with a couple Void Bolts. Or just one Void Bolt. Either way. This is how you play a homicidal maniac in this. Look at them run, the cowards. You, sir, are dead now. Wait, how did he survive? No matter, Mehrunes Razor, go! There we go. And my army caught up, finally! Now, I know it may look like this build has a weird origin story, a backstory that has a place in Tamriel, somewhere, usually not in Skyrim. I mean, it can be, they can be natives of Skyrim, of course, but it's more interesting when they come from an area that we've seen in a previous Elder Scrolls game, or at least we know about, based on, well, we've seen all of Tamriel in Elder Scrolls 1. So, I mean, technically we can say that they came from anywhere. And there's plenty of lore to support pretty much them coming from anywhere. And, like, people will say, well, if he came from High Rock, then he better be a Breton. Like, that isn't true. People have immigrated all over. There's been lots of cross-population. I mean, there are Argonians in Morrowind. There are Khajiits in Morrowind. So on and so forth. There are all races in the Imperial Province. Now, here's a bunch of evil necromancers I gotta kill. I'm just, throwing on my diseases on these necromancers from a distance, letting my army basically do its thing. This guy right here, though, I got too close to him, so I think I'll just Void Bolt his face. There we go. Hit him with a Void Bolt. He's dead. Perfect. And my skeleton's basically mopped up after I applied the diseases. There's just one guy left alive, and he's down there. Which is kind of hilarious in it to itself. I mean, yeah, exactly. I got him. As far as a character's origin is concerned, there are plenty of awesome things you can do. But my main concern was coming up with something that really read into his insanity, but still gave him a connection to the Blackworm cult. You see, the Blackworm cult's connection to everything got severed in Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion when the hero of Cyrodiil, the 7th champion, the hero of Kvatch, blah blah blah, the guy who you play as, basically killed Manny Marco in his mortal form. And as a result, the Blackworm cult kind of dispersed, or so we believe. And as a result, and because of that, I just imagine in my head that they splintered off into all these different groups with all their different personal ideologies and their own personal leaders. So, you know, Antioch, for all I know, could have been a devout follower of the God of Worms, and, you know, all of this could be bullshit, but, yeah, headcanon is headcanon, and I just tried to make up something that sounded cool. As for the rape that the character experienced, let's face it, there's nothing else than that. You know, it's freaking child molestation here. But how do you get a guy who's that fucked up, who wants to break people apart? Well, he hears the God of Worms speaking to him. Does the God of Worms actually speak to him, or is he 100% nutso? Maybe it's a combination of the two. because I know he's mentally unhinged, and that's part of the fun of the character, because you can delight in ripping your enemies apart. You can delight in literally seeing a fresh corpse, go over, harvest it, take everything from them, and it's awesome. Watch their corpse disintegrate, and you have just benefited from tearing someone to pieces. You literally skinned their corpse and took their organs. How do you feel about that? You should feel good, because you just lost a skeletal warrior in battle, and you need to go to conjure skeleton and summon yourself up a new one to replace it. But it's okay, because those necromancers gave their everything so that you could have a replacement skeleton warrior. And that's really the fun of the build. Even if you decide not to do the conjured skeletons anymore once you gain Lich form, well, you still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 death guards on your side. And either way, this is a minion fest. It is a fun build in my opinion. It is overpowered as crap, and you may want to install some pretty heavy difficulty mods to counter that. But I'm going to leave that up to you, because maybe you want to be overpowered at level 40. It's all up to the person who plays it. Now, in terms of children being bought by noble families, this actually did happen. You see, before, kings would basically say, a member of your family has to participate in this campaign. No exceptions. So, in order to spare their children the horrors of war, these noble families would buy children, raise them very harshly, making them seek approval constantly. So these approval-seeking children would go out of their way to fight, believing that they were the legitimate children, when actually their older brother was the person that was being protected. And you'll also find that in those situations, child abuse was very, very common, because they were seeing the child as a tool and not a person. And as far as sexual abuse of children, that happened all the time. The higher status the noble family, usually the more corrupt it was. And it's interesting, because you'll look at the largest kingdoms in real life in the past, and their nobilities were corrupt as hell, even if the kings were not. And the kings would basically put up with a corrupt nobility in order to ensure stability of their kingdom, because by doing favors for the corrupt nobility, they could get the support that they desperately, desperately needed to hold on to their crowns. Anyway, it's that kind of drawing upon real-life circumstances, but throwing it into Tamriel, which was, let's face it, in the Daggerfall era, was freaking huge. In Arena, but Daggerfall, both of them, you had almost a real-life scale, which was freaking awesome. And that's what I will constantly draw upon when I look at, future character builds, is not the size and scale of Morrowind, Oblivion, or Skyrim, but the size and scale of Tamriel in my head, which will always go back to the first 2 Elder Scrolls games, because I see them in their original size. And I respect the fact that they downsized it in order to, give everything a stylized, handcrafted approach. But it's disappointing. Very disappointing when you see a world that you could practically live in forever and not exhaust all the possibilities. Anyway, that is the kind of fantasy realm that I'm using to draw upon when I create these builds. And when people ask me, where do I get the inspiration for these things, the specific stories, and how can I make them? Well, honestly, I just dwell on a certain setup, and I let the story write itself in my head. And that's how I've always been with writing. Remember that these build videos are simply templates. and you should take what you want from them and disregard the rest. That is how it works. So, if you don't like certain aspects of the character backstory, ignore them. If you don't like certain restrictions of the character, ignore it. Alter it how you see fit, and use it. In the end, this is my representation of a necromancer using the Percus Maximus bone construction abilities. Now, eventually, I will be doing a couple smaller build videos for things like Oblivion, Morrowind, and Daggerfall, but those smaller build videos would be something along the lines of the length of an average Fudge Muppet video, and really wouldn't be that modded. You know what I mean? It's just something for someone looking to get into these older games. You know, a way to get started. So that's about it. Now, what you guys can do for me is you can send me more suggestions. Specifically, character builds that you'd like. I would very much like to see those posted to my subreddit. I would also very much like to hear about different mods that may not have appeared in my Ultimate Mod Codex that you know about, that are new, that are in development, things of that nature. I am not all-knowing. In fact, I know very little. I believe I said this once. I know a little bit about everything, but not a lot about anything. So, in that spirit, if you have things to share, please do share them. If you want to be a homicidal maniac, this is the build for you. Now, if you've watched the video thus far, I would very much appreciate it if you give this video either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, depending on if you liked the build or not. And I'm not allergic to thumbs down, unlike some other people. So just give it your honest opinion. Now, I have some pretty generous viewers. That is to say, I've been gifted Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Grand Theft Auto 5, things of that nature. I haven't had to pay for those myself, which I am very grateful for, considering I don't intend on buying new games at this time. I have a gigantic backlog to play yet. But what I'm getting at is, if you guys want to support my channel, it's not about money. It's really about sharing. Share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, share it on Pinterest or Reddit. Be it this video or my Kimono Tong Life Taker video or my Night of the Nine or my Worm's Tooth video. Just any of them. Feel free to share them. That's what actually does my channel the most good. Now, I'm going to share a drink with them, and by that I mean I'm going to kill all of them right now. And if the guy thinks he's actually going to get away, he is dead wrong. Last witness killed? Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one, and I'll see y'all next time.